Welcome to the deep dive. So if you think real estate is mostly about, flipping houses on TV or just that simple buy low, sell high idea, well, we might need to adjust that picture today.
Yeah, definitely
Our
not.
mission here is to really get past that surface level and dive into what it actually takes.
Hmm.
It's strategic, demanding, sometimes pretty ruthless, honestly.
It really is. The sources we've looked at paint a clear picture. Success isn't just luck or finding one great deal. It's about mastering finance, thinking about taxes way ahead of time, and sticking to some pretty rigorous systems.
Hmm.
We've got a lot to cover. Complex investment strategies like using serious leverage with things like the BRRR method, but also advanced tax planning, 1031s, cost segregation, that kind of thing.
Right, and connecting all that hustle and the technical side to the bigger picture.
Hmm.
Like systems for actually running a successful business, things like ninja selling or the 12-week year for managing your time.
And grounding it all in the history, the architecture, the policies that actually shaped the neighborhoods and houses we're dealing with.
So the big question really that we're trying to answer is, what do you actually need to know? What skills do you need to master to really make it in this kind of entrepreneurial high-stakes world?
Okay, let's get into it.
All right, let's unpack this. Starting with maybe the cornerstone of it all, strategy and capital, how money is used.
Okay, first up, leverage. Our sources don't really treat debt as this scary thing to avoid. It's more like a tool, a resource you need to learn how to use effectively, even maximize.
Yeah, the idea seems to be if you're paying all cash for properties, you might actually be leaving money on the table, sacrificing speed, and maybe even overall returns.
Let's put some numbers on that because the material gives a pretty good example. Imagine an investor. Let's call him John. He's got $100,000.
Okay.
Option one. John buys one property for $100,000 cash, no debt. Let's say it brings in $12,000 a year in income. His cash return is 12%.
12%, that sounds pretty decent.
It is, it's solid. But now compare that to the leveraged approach. John takes the same $100,000, but uses it as a 20% down payment on 5 different $100,000 homes.
Okay, so now he controls $500,000 worth of property with $400,000 in loans.
Exactly. Now, even after paying the mortgages each month, the source suggests his total net cash flow from all 5 properties could jump to maybe $18,000 a year.
Whoa. So he still only put in his original $100,000 cash,
Right.
but now he's getting $18,000 back annually. That pushes his return on that initial cash up to 18%.
That's a 50% increase in his return just by using, well, OPM, other people's money.
That really illustrates the power,
Yeah.
but it also brings up what you mentioned earlier, the risk.
Absolutely. That's the flip side. Leverage magnifies gains, yes, but it magnifies losses just as much. If John's single cash property needed a new roof, his 12% return might drop maybe to 8%, still positive.
But if his 5 leveraged properties hit a rough patch, like high vacancy or the market dips,
Then that 18% return could disappear fast. It could even go negative, especially if he's leveraged to the hilt. So deciding how much leverage feels right, that's a really personal calculation you have to make up front.
and to compare these deals, to kind of standardize things, the sources keep coming back to cash-on-cash return on investment, COCROI.
COCROI. Yeah, it's a great, simple metric. Helps you compare apples and oranges, like a specific rental property versus just putting money in the stock market, say the S&P 500.
Why is it so useful?
Well, it's straightforward. It cuts through things like hoping for future appreciation or complex tax stuff. It just asks, how much cash did I actually put into this deal, and how much cash did I get back this year? Simple as that.
So the calculation is just the annual net cash flow divided by the total cash you invested personally.
Exactly. And that lets you quickly see if the yield you're getting from that property is worth the hassle, the illiquidity, the management effort, compared to something totally passive like an index fund.
Right. If a leverage deal is only giving you, say, 4% COCROI, maybe your money's better off somewhere else with less effort.
Could be. Now, moving from the general idea of leverage to a specific tactic, the sources talk a lot about the BRRR strategy.
BRRR. Okay, what does that stand for again?
It's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And it's often presented as like the fast track to building equity quickly.
And the main advantage isn't just the rental income, right? It's about creating value up front.
That's the core of it. You buy something distressed, maybe undervalued, you fix it up smartly. That's the force appreciation part. Then the crucial step is the refinance.
Okay, explain the refinance part.
Well, after the rehab, the property is worth more. You get a new appraisal, and a lender gives you a new loan based on that higher value. If you did it right, you might be able to pull out most, maybe all, of your original cash investment.
Ah, so your own money isn't tied up in the deal anymore, or very little is.
Exactly. Which means your cash-on-cash return becomes, well, theoretically infinite if you get all your cash out. Then you take that money and repeat. You do it again on the next property.
And that repeat aspect is where the learning curve really kicks in, isn't it?
All right.
The sources almost talk about it like reps in the gym.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Successful investors focus on quality repetitions. Each deal you do, you get better. Better at estimating rehab costs, better at negotiating, better at finding good tenants, screening them.
That repetition builds the skill sets.
It really does. And this whole strategy ties into surviving long-term financially, especially with inflation. There's this analogy in the sources about inflation being like a rising tide.
And your real estate investments are like buoys you put in the ocean.
Right. If you have leveraged properties, your debt amount is fixed. But the property value and usually the rents you can charge tend to rise with inflation over time.
So inflation actually helps you by shrinking the real value of your debt while boosting the value of your asset.
It acts as a hedge. But you only get that benefit if you actually own the asset.
Okay, so you've got the strategy, the capital, but you can't do it alone. Let's talk about the team.
Crucial. The sources position the buyer, the investor, as the main driver.
Yeah.
Everyone else, agents, lenders, property managers, they're resources the buyer leverages.
And you really rely on them. For example, the idea of using your agent not just to find deals, but almost as like an extra set of eyes.
Yeah, for oversight. Maybe on smaller jobs, minor repairs. Instead of paying for a separate inspector for some basic plumbing fix, maybe your experienced agent can double-check the contractor's work when they're already there. Saves a bit of money, saves time.
That makes sense. And speaking of contractors, there's a really simple but important psychological tip about paying them.
Pay them promptly. It sounds obvious, but contractors often work on pretty thin margins. They might be paying for materials and labor out of their own pocket before you pay them.
Right. So if you get a reputation as someone who pays slowly.
Your job goes straight to the bottom of their list. Doesn't matter how big it is. They have to prioritize the clients who keep their cash flowing. So paying on time isn't just nice, it's actually a system for getting things done efficiently.
Smart. And similarly, with property managers, you're not just hiring someone to collect rent.
No, you're hiring their local knowledge, their expertise. You bring them on as a hired hand to tap into what they know about the area. Which streets are best for single-family rentals? Which neighborhoods work better for multifamily? They know that stuff.
That saves you potentially months of guesswork and costly mistakes.
Absolutely. Now let's zoom out a bit. Connect this practical real estate stuff to some broader finance concepts. The sources bring in ideas from Wall Street, like beta and systematic risk.
Okay, beta. That measures market risk, right?
Yeah, basically, it comes from the capital asset pricing model. The idea is that the total risk or the variability of returns for any investment can be split into two parts.
Systematic and unsystematic.
Exactly. Systematic risk is the overall market risk, the tendency for pretty much all investments to move up or down with the general economy. You can't really diversify this away completely. That's what beta measures. A beta of 1 means it moves with the market. Higher beta, more volatile than the market.
So if the whole economy tanks, your property value probably takes a hit too. That's systematic. What's unsystematic?
That's the risk specific to your particular asset. For a stock, it might be a strike at the company or a failed product launch. For your rental property, it could be a fire, a bad tenant who causes damage, a localized zoning change, stuff like that.
Things you can diversify away by owning multiple properties in different places.
Precisely. And the core idea in finance theory is that the market only really rewards you, gives you a higher expected return for taking on systematic risk. There's no extra return expected just for holding risks you could have gotten rid of through diversification.
Which really underscores why having a portfolio, not just one property, is so important in real estate too. Spreads out that unsystematic risk.
Now, speaking of risks you can't easily avoid, the sources call inflation the dark horse when you're trying to predict financial returns. And it's particularly bad news for bond investors.
Why are bonds so sensitive to inflation?
Well, think about it. If inflation goes up, investors will demand a higher interest rate to get the same real return, the return after accounting for inflation. So new bonds being issued will offer higher rates, which means the older bonds, the ones that were issued before with lower fixed rates, their prices have to fall to offer a competitive yield. So if you bought bonds before interest rates rose, you face a capital loss if you need to sell them. Inflation eats away at the bondholder's value unless they're specific inflation-protected bonds.
Got it. Okay, one last point in this section on capital and risk, a simple technique called portfolio rebalancing.
Yeah, it sounds basic, but it requires discipline. Let's say you decide your ideal mix is 60% stocks, 40% bonds, but then stocks have a great run and suddenly your portfolio drifts to 70% stocks, 30% bonds.
You're holding more risk than you originally intended.
Exactly. Rebalancing means you systematically sell some of the winners, the stocks in this case, and buy more of the losers, the bonds, to get back to your target 60-40 mix.
Which feels wrong to a lot of people, right? Selling the thing that's doing well.
Totally counterintuitive sometimes, but doing this regularly, maybe once a year, forces you to buy low and sell high automatically. It reduces overall risk, and studies suggest it can even potentially boost your long-term returns by enforcing that discipline. Simple concept, harder to stick to without a system.
Okay, let's shift gears. Section 1 was about getting the capital and using leverage. Now, Section 2 feels like it's about protecting that capital, mostly through smart tax strategies. And the big theme seems to be plan ahead.
Yes, absolutely critical. The sources really hammer this point. Talk to a tax advisor before you make big moves, not just when it's time to file. Your regular CPA might be great for standard returns, but they might not know the ins and outs of specialized real estate strategies.
You need a specialist for things like cost segregation. What is that exactly?
So most investors just depreciate the building part of their property over, 27.5 years for residential. But cost segregation recognizes that a property isn't just one thing. It's made up of lots of components.
Yeah.
Things like carpeting, appliances, maybe special electrical wiring, landscaping, parking lots, even cabinetry. A cost segregation study identifies all these different components and assigns them shorter depreciation schedules, maybe 5, 7, or 15 years, instead of the full 27.5.
And the benefit of doing that.
You get much bigger depreciation deductions much sooner, right after you buy the property. These are paper losses, but they can offset your real taxable income from the rent, or maybe even other income sources. It significantly lowers your tax bill in the early years.
So a big boost to your cash flow right away, usually worth the cost of getting the study done.
Often, yes, especially on larger properties. It's a powerful tool. Another huge one is the 1031 exchange.
Ah, yes. The way to defer capital gains taxes when you sell an investment property.
Right, by reinvesting the proceeds into another like-kind investment property, it's fantastic for compounding wealth because you keep your pre-tax dollars working for you. But the rules are incredibly strict.
The timelines, right? 45 days and 180 days.
Exactly. You have just 45 days from the day you sell your old property to formally identify potential replacement properties. And you absolutely must close on one or more of those identified properties within 180 days total from the initial sale date. Miss those deadlines, and the tax deferral is gone.
Wow, no room for error. And there are rules about the value, too.
Generally, the replacement property you buy has to be worth equal or more than the one you sold. And the equity you roll over also needs to be equal or greater. If you buy something cheaper or take cash out or even just reduce the amount of debt you have.
That difference is taxable.
Yes, that's called boot, and it's typically taxed as a capital gain in the year you receive it. Debt relief, or mortgage boot, is a common way people accidentally trigger taxes.
And a really important point. This is for investment properties, right?
Yeah.
Not your personal home.
Correct. You can't sell your primary residence and 1031 into an investment property, or vice versa. However, if you used to live in a house, then moved out and rented it for a decent period, holding it as an investment, that property can potentially qualify for a 1031 when you eventually sell it.
Interesting. Okay, shifting to retirement accounts. There's a specific advantage mentioned for solo 401k compared to IRAs when using leverage. Something about UDFI taxes.
Yes, unrelated debt-financed income. This just gets a bit technical, but it's super important if you want to use loans inside your retirement account to buy real estate.
So if I use my self-directed IRA and get a loan to buy a rental.
A non-recourse loan, typically. The income generated that's attributable to the loan portion, which could be a large chunk, maybe 50–80% of the income, is subject to UDFI taxes. It eats into the tax advantages significantly.
But a solo 401k doesn't have that problem.
For acquisition debt, generally no. The IRS rules allow a solo 401k, which is often used by self-employed people or those with side businesses, to use leverage to buy real estate without triggering UDFI tax on the income from that borrowed money.
So you get the amplified returns from leverage, and the full pre-tax amount grows tax-advantaged. That seems like a huge difference.
It can be. Makes the solo 401k a much more powerful vehicle for leveraged real estate investing within retirement funds.
Okay, moving beyond taxes to protecting the assets themselves. entity formation, like LLCs. The advice seems to be get advice before you set things up, and don't go overboard.
Exactly. Don't just form an LLC because someone told you to. Talk to legal and tax advisors first. The best structure, LLC, S Corp, maybe something else, depends heavily on your specific situation. How much equity you have, your state's laws, the number of properties.
And the sources had that cautionary tale about someone who built this incredibly complex, ironclad legal structure.
Yeah, but they only had a small amount of equity in their rentals. The annual cost to maintain that complex structure, state filing fees, registered agent fees, legal check-ins added up to like $8,500 a year.
Which wiped out all their profit.
Completely. The cost of the protection was more than the value it was protecting. So the protection needs to be proportional to the risk and the assets.
On a simpler level, a basic protection step everyone should take: separate bank accounts.
Absolutely essential. Keep your personal finances completely separate from your business rental finances. Don't pay for groceries from the rent account. Don't pay the mortgage from your personal checking.
Why is that so critical?
It helps maintain the corporate veil. If the IRS ever audits your business entity, they'll look at the bank records. If they see you mixing funds constantly, they might argue the entity isn't truly separate from you personally.
And then they could potentially audit your personal taxes too.
It increases that risk. Separate accounts create a clear boundary, limit what they can easily scrutinize, and strengthen the legal separation of the entity. Simple, but vital.
Okay, let's talk property management. Getting the most out of the properties you own. There's an interesting point about vacancy rates.
Yeah. If your properties are always 100% full, especially in a market that normally has, say, 5% vacancy or more, it probably means your rents are too low.
That feels counterintuitive. Don't you want 100% occupancy?
Well, yes and no. Property managers might love it because turnover is work. But if you're consistently below market rents, you're leaving money on the table. The sources suggest that if you do the math, the extra income from charging true market rent usually more than covers the occasional cost of a vacancy, cleaning, maybe a month of lost rent.
So don't be afraid to raise rents to market, even if it means occasional turnover.
Generally, yes. And controlling that turnover starts with good tenant screening. The advice is pre-screen people over the phone before you even show them the property.
How does that work?
Just be upfront about your minimum criteria. Hi, thanks for calling. Just so you know, our requirements are typically a gross monthly income of at least 3 times the rent, a credit score around 600 or better, and no recent evictions. Does that sound like it fits your situation?
Saves everyone time if they clearly don't qualify.
Exactly. Filters out people who aren't serious or can't meet the basics. Now, here's a really interesting tip about risky tenants who do qualify but maybe make you nervous.
Okay.
The advice is refuse prepaid rent if they offer it.
Refuse money. Why?
Because let's say they offer you 6 months rent up front, you take it. Then, in month 7, they start causing problems, you need to evict. That prepaid rent can actually work against you. A judge might see it as proof of their commitment, making the eviction harder.
Huh. So what's the alternative if you're feeling wary?
If it's legal in your area, ask for a larger security deposit instead. That provides protection without complicating a potential future eviction quite the same way.
Interesting. Okay, lastly in this section, safety and finding extra income. Prioritize safety repairs.
Always. Fix loose handrails, frayed carpets, weak door locks, any potential hazard. It protects your tenants, obviously, but it also protects you from lawsuits. Deferred maintenance on safety items is just asking for trouble.
Makes sense. And then look for ways to create extra income streams.
Yeah, value-add opportunities. Is parking really scarce in your area? Maybe stop including it for free in the rent. Charge a separate monthly fee for a dedicated spot.
Like an unbundling approach.
Kind of. Or look at unused space. Got a big basement or attic that's just collecting dust? Maybe you can build some simple, secure storage lockers down there. Rent them out for $10, $20 a month each. It turns dead space into income.
All right, moving on. We've talked money, taxes, property management. Now let's get into the skills and systems needed to really operate at a high level, whether you're an agent, investor, broker, whatever role. Starting with this ninja selling idea.
Yeah, ninja selling, it's really a philosophy, a mindset shift. The core idea is stop selling in the traditional sense and start attracting. You create value and clients naturally come to you.
Create value. How do they define that?
It boils down to 2 things. Either solving a problem for someone, easing their pain, as the system calls it, or making them feel good, contributing to their pleasure.
Okay, pain and pleasure. But how do you figure out what someone's pain or pleasure points are without being, pushy or salesy?
Through structured listening. Using tools like the F40 questions, that's family, occupation, recreation, dreams. But you're not just making small talk. You're actively listening for shifts in energy, specific words, anything that signals what truly motivates them.
Can you give an example? Like, how would a dream answer reveal pain?
Sure. Let's say a potential client mentions their dream is retiring and moving across the country to be near grandkids, but then they mention they're still 6 months away from retirement and haven't even listed their current house yet.
Ah, so the pain is the timing, the logistics, the uncertainty of selling the current place on schedule.
Exactly. It's not about the price of the new place. It's about the certainty and smoothness of the transition. Once you understand that that's their core need, their pain, you can tailor your approach to be the guide who solves that specific problem for them.
And the ultimate goal of attracting clients this way is to become top of mind for referrals.
hmm When someone asks, hey, do you know a good real estate person?
Yeah.
You want your name to be the first one they think of. And for that to happen, people need to clearly know three things about you:
Which are?
who you are, your name, that you're trustworthy, what you do specifically, list and sell real estate or whatever your niche is, and where you do it, your company name or the geographic area you serve. If you change roles, the sources say you have to really work to update people's perception.
Makes sense. Okay, this focus on relationships and understanding needs leads into negotiation. The sources define it in a perhaps surprising way, not as combat, but as playing the emotional game.
Yeah, it's about understanding it's a human interaction governed by emotions and social dynamics, not just a battle over numbers. The techniques suggested are really about building rapport and uncovering the real needs. Like what? First, slow down. Especially with email or texts, it's easy to rush, which can make the other side feel pressured or unheard. Take your time. Second, make the focus the other person. Good negotiation is maybe 80% listening, 20% talking. Understand their position first.
And the third one, put a smile on your face, even on the phone.
Sounds silly, maybe, but yeah. Your physical state affects your mental state. A positive frame of mind encourages collaboration, makes you seem more approachable, less adversarial. It changes the dynamic.
Interesting. Now, there's a really counterintuitive point about the word no. Getting a no early is better than a quick yes.
It often is, yeah. Think about it. If you're hesitant to ask a tough question or propose a term you think might get rejected, the other side might just give you a quick, easy yes to avoid conflict or just end the conversation.
But that yes might not be real commitment. It might hide an unresolved issue.
Exactly. A firm no, on the other hand, tells you where the real boundary is. It gives you information. It lets you ask why it's a no, understand the objection, and then maybe find a different way to address their actual need. A hard no is often more valuable than a soft yes.
And digging deeper like that is how you find what the sources call the black swan, the hidden motivation.
Right. The unstated constraint or goal that's really driving the other party's decisions. There was a great example in the materials about a commercial property deal. Looked like a standard sale.
But the seller had a hidden motivation.
Yes. Through careful pre-work, asking questions, listening, the buyer figured out the seller wasn't primarily motivated by getting the absolute top dollar. Their real need, their black swan, was speed.
Why speed?
Turns out the seller urgently needed the cash from this sale to pay off looming mortgages on some other properties that were in trouble, facing potential foreclosure. Speed was everything to them.
So the buyer could leverage that knowledge.
They offered a slightly lower price than maybe market value, but guaranteed a super fast 2-week closing. The seller jumped on it. Knowing the black swan changed the whole negotiation dynamic away from just price.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And this skill applies directly to that common friction point.
Yeah.
Renegotiating after the home inspection.
Oh, yeah. If the inspection turns up significant, unexpected problems, major roof issues, foundation cracks, whatever, you absolutely have grounds to revisit the terms. You've already invested time and money in the process, which gives you some leverage.
But the advice is to handle it carefully.
Definitely. Don't just demand a discount. Frame it as, okay, we have this new information, this unexpected problem. How can we work together to solve this? Approach it collaboratively, respectfully, based on the new facts.
Okay, shifting to broader business systems. The story brand concept comes up, the idea that the customer has to be the hero to the story, not your brand.
Right. Your business, your service, you as the professional, you're the guide. You're Obi-Wan. The customer is Luke Skywalker. Your role is to help them succeed, to overcome their challenge and achieve their goal.
And a key part of that is having a really clear, simple message. A one-liner.
Exactly. Something repeatable that instantly communicates who you help and what problem you solve for them. It makes it easy for potential clients to see themselves in your story and understand if you're the right guide for them.
That focus on clarity also applies to the actual transaction process,
Yeah.
making it less confusing for the client.
Yes, creating a process plan. The sources suggest breaking down what can be a really complete journey buying or selling a house into maybe 3 to 6 clear, simple steps.
Like paving a sidewalk through a field.
That's the analogy used, yeah. Instead of letting the client wander aimlessly through the complex field of the transaction, you give them a clear path. Step 1, this happens. Step 2, we do this. Step 3, your turn for that. It reduces anxiety, builds confidence, and keeps things moving.
Finally, for personal effectiveness, the 12-week year system. That's the core idea there.
It's about ditching the traditional annual planning cycle, which often leads to procrastination until the end of the year. Instead, you treat every 12 weeks as a full year. You set specific, measurable goals for that 12-week period and focus intensely on execution.
With an emphasis on accountability and specific activities.
Big time. It stresses creating a model work week. You actually schedule blocks of time for the most important high-leverage activities: prospecting, lead follow-up, strategic planning, whatever drives your business forward. The Ninja 9 activities from the other system fit right in here.
So you're scheduling the important stuff, not just reacting to the urgent stuff.
That's the goal. It forces you to be proactive. And it requires discipline, which ties into the concept of delayed gratification.
Choosing the long-term reward over short-term ease.
Mm-hmm. Choosing the pleasurable results, like financial freedom, a thriving business over the pleasurable activity, which might be avoiding that tough phone call, or scrolling social media instead of making contacts. Sticking to that model work week means consistently choosing the productive discomfort that leads to long-term success.
Okay, so we've covered strategy, finance, taxes, skills, systems. But to really succeed, you also need context, right? Understanding the actual product, the houses, the neighborhoods, and how they got to be the way they are. Let's touch on some American house styles as historical markers.
Yeah, knowing the history baked into the walls can be really important. The sources start way back with American Georgian, emerging after 1715. Think symmetry, often brick, very formal, based on late English Stuart architecture. Westover in Virginia is a classic example.
And for someone dealing with these today, what's the relevance?
Well, they often come with significant restoration costs and potential historical preservation rules you have to follow. They signify status, but also complexity.
Then came neoclassicism, post-1762, influenced by Jefferson, Palladio, Roman ideals.
Right, spurred by new archaeological finds and publications like The Antiquities of Athens. Jefferson's use of classical elements was actually seen as quite revolutionary compared to the strict Palladian rules followed earlier. These homes are beautiful, formal, but again can hide expensive structural or mechanical upgrade needs.
Okay, jumping forward to the mid-19th century, Italianate, 1845, 1875.
This is a Victorian style. You often see low-pitched roofs, wide eaves with brackets, maybe tall, narrow windows. The key point from the sources is that it was mostly an urban style, rarely freestanding country houses.
So if you see an Italianate today, it's likely in a denser, older neighborhood, maybe already converted to multi-units.
So chance, yeah. That affects who your buyer or renter might be and your renovation approach.
Then later in the 19th century, the shingle style, 1880, 1905.
Yeah.
Sounds very coastal New England.
It often is associated with that, but it was influential elsewhere too. Very American style. Known for being more organic, with open flowing floor plans, kind of a precursor to modern living. And the exterior is unified by, well, shingles, often left to weather naturally.
Desirable today for that openness, but maybe tricky to renovate.
Can be. Modifying them while respecting the original design integrity, which architectural historians really value, can be a challenge.
And lastly, the Dutch colonial revival, 1890, 1930. What's the defining feature there?
That characteristic gambrel roof, the one that looks like a barn roof, where the lower slope curves out gently at the bottom. You see these a lot in older suburbs, generally very popular, marketable homes, but that complex roofline can sometimes have structural issues or limit usable attic space.
So understanding these styles helps with valuation, anticipating renovation costs, maybe even marketing. But we also need to look beyond the single house at the city structure.
Right. The evolution of the American metropolis. The sources point to Bronxville, New York, developed way back in 1889 as a really influential early suburb. It was designed specifically to attract wealthy professionals. It deliberately avoided the standard street grid, used curvy roads, banned fences between properties to create an open feel, and insisted on varied architecture. It really set the template for that aspirational, high-status suburban ideal.
But fast forward to today, and the picture is different. The sources talk about a new urban crisis.
Yeah, the pattern now is described as the patchwork metropolis. The middle class is shrinking, and cities are increasingly divided into areas of concentrated wealth and advantage, right next to areas of concentrated poverty and disadvantage. Big disparities.
And this fuels gentrification.
Directly. Higher income people, often white professionals, move back into certain urban neighborhoods seeking amenities or shorter commutes. Demand surges, rents and property taxes go way up.
And the original lower-income residents, often families of color, get pushed out.
That's what the sources observe. The economic pressure makes the integration that sometimes happens initially quite temporary. The rising cost of housing becomes a barrier.
Now, critically, the sources make a strong claim about how this segregation originally happened. Not just individual choices, but government policy.
A very strong claim. That the segregation we see today wasn't accidental, but was, in their words, a nationwide project of the federal government during the 20th century, enacted through specific laws and practices.
Like what kind of practices?
Things like the FHA and VA explicitly refusing to insure mortgages in racially mixed neighborhoods or for black buyers in white neighborhoods, requiring restrictive covenants in new subdivisions they financed, making them whites only.
And local zoning, too.
Yes, using zoning powers deliberately to disadvantage black neighborhoods, allowing polluting factories, liquor stores, vice districts only in or next to African-American areas while protecting white neighborhoods. These policies actively created slums and suppressed property values for generations.
Understanding that history seems vital for anyone working in these markets today. It affects everything from current values to appraisal issues.
Absolutely. And it connects to another point the sources make: the systemic cost of poverty. It's often literally more expensive to do business in low-income areas.
Oh.
Higher insurance premiums due to higher perceived risks of crime or fire, more spending needed on security, maybe higher rates of theft or vandalism. These aren't judgments, they're business realities. And those extra costs inevitably get passed on to the residents.
In the form of higher prices for everyday goods and services, reinforcing the disadvantage.
Exactly. It's a tough cycle.
Okay, just a couple more broader points from the sources. One contrasts owning physical property versus investing in REITs.
Right. Real estate investment trusts. These are basically companies you can buy stock in, and they own or finance big portfolios of real estate. The appeal is liquidity. You can buy and sell shares easily, unlike a building. And they're often seen as a hedge against inflation because they own real assets.
But the downside?
You give up direct control. You don't get to make decisions about the specific properties. And you generally lose out on those powerful direct ownership tax benefits, like accelerated depreciation through cost segregation we talked about earlier. Trade-offs.
Okay, now, we need to address two very specific kind of isolated data points that were included in the source materials provided for this deep dive. We're just reporting these impartially as they appeared. They don't really connect to the main themes we've discussed.
Understood. The first is a historical note about Watergate. It mentions that E. Howard Hunt, who worked for the Nixon White House, was tasked with investigating JFK's private life and apparently received some materials for this from the Library of Congress, and this factored into the subsequent cover-up events.
Okay, just noting that was in the source material. The second point relates to public health data, specifically concerning COVID-19 vaccines in the UK.
Yes. The source cited specific figures reported in the UK up to April 2021. It mentioned 757,654 official adverse reactions reported across 3 specific vaccines, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, and linked over 1,000 deaths to those vaccines through the official reporting system.
And the source also included an estimation.
It did. Based on an assumed general underreporting rate of about 10% for such systems, the source estimated that the actual number of adverse reactions and deaths could potentially be 10 times higher than those officially reported figures.
Okay. Again, we're simply relaying these specific data points precisely as they were presented in the source materials without adding our own analysis or endorsement, just to ensure we've covered all the provided information.
Yeah.
Hashtag tag outro. So wrapping up this deep dive, it's clear that succeeding in real estate, whether as an investor or a professional, means operating on a lot of different levels at once.
Definitely. You need the financial tools, understanding leverage, tax codes like 1031s, and cost segregation. You need the interpersonal systems like ninja selling for building relationships, solid negotiation skills.
And You need that broader context, understanding systematic risk from finance, but also the history that shaped the cities and houses themselves. It's complex.
It really boils down to leverage in all its forms, doesn't it? Leveraging money, sure, but also leveraging your time effectively, leveraging knowledge, leveraging relationships. We heard that leveraged money is hard-working money.
And that successful professionals focus on productive activities,
Mhm.
driven by systems like the model work week, not just hoping for good results to happen.
Right. It's about building that structure for success.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with, something to reflect on, is this. Given everything we've discussed today, the emphasis on systems, strategy, and mastering this complex business, how much of your own day-to-day effort is truly focused on those high-leverage activities?
Not just being busy, but busy doing the things that actually maximize your leverage. Financially, yes, but also in terms of knowledge, connections, and how you allocate your time.
Are your actions really aligned with those long-term leverage outcomes? Or more driven by short-term comfort or reaction?
It's a crucial question to ask if you want to move beyond just participating in the market to actually mastering it.
Definitely something to think about. Until our next deep dive, keep digging,